Good morning. I think maybe the rain has kept a few people away. They may still drift in. I would,
Yes.
I would like to encourage you to think about the writing club. We have a lovely core group, and we would love more members. We have a different topic every week, and we just have a good time. And just think about it. Come talk to me during break or afterwards. And Lana?
I'd like to put my 2 cents in. Please.
Lana has 2 cents.
Okay, I hate writing. I absolutely abhor doing it. I avoid it. But I enjoy the writing club because most of the times we're writing about our personal lives and our thoughts. And what I have experienced is a lot of this stuff I'm going to put in little plastic covers so that my grandchildren will have these, and my great-grandchildren, God knows who, will have these to remember, see who Lana Tuller was. So I really wholeheartedly encourage you to join the writing club. It's just the greatest thing.
When is it?
First Wednesday of the month. And it's about an hour.
Where do they meet? In this room?
Yeah.
Here.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Are we streaming today? Okay, great. So today we are going to Libya. And we're going to at least start Libya. I'm not 1,000% sure we'll get through Libya because there are, on our journey through Libya, we're going to tangentially go to a few world history things to put context into it, which I love because I think we will all want to be educated men and women. And so when I have a chance to speak about world events that influence Jewish events, especially in the course of ancient and medieval history, I think it's really important for us to do that. So let's start out this way. The community of Jews throughout history in Libya was made up of what we call Maghrebi Jews. Maghrebi meaning from Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. And so that would be this area here, as well as the influx of Sephardic Jews after the Inquisition. Okay, that's not a surprise to us. We've seen that in every country we have studied so far. There is a synagogue in Sirte, which you'll see at the very top, right in the center of Libya, on the coast, which goes back to the 10th century BCE. So what are the dates of the 10th century BCE?
David.
Good. So it's from 1000 to 900, right? So if you'll remember, the way this works, we have the year 0 here, which by all standards, this is Jesus' birth, even though we know it didn't happen in the year 0. So we have 100, 200, 300, 400, all the way up to 1,000. And as we go this way, it goes ascending, 100, 200, 300. And in forever, this had been referred to BC, before Christ, and this had been referred to AD, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. Academically, we don't use those terms. We use now BCE, before the Common Era, and CE, the Common Era. So you'll still see this in certain places, but it's pretty much been replaced now by BCE and CE. So the 10th century is right here. And Lana, you correctly said, King David, that's 1000 BCE. That's a date that we can get our heads around. 1000 BCE is King David. So who is in the 900s? Solomon. Excellent. Around 970 is Solomon. Okay. And so the first synagogue in Sirte, in Libya, dates to King Solomon's time. How could that happen?
Well, Solomon had all these wives, and he probably had diplomatic relationships with these countries. I'm just supposing this. And therefore, if you have diplomatic relationships with people, people have to come into that area to do the diplomacy.
Okay.
And therefore, you need a synagogue.
So Lana posits that, Solomon had many, many wives, we are told. And the reason that he had many wives is because he married the daughters of surrounding kings so that he could make military alliances. If you marry the daughter of the king of the country next door to you, the country next door to you is not going to attack you because your daughter is part of the royal family. So, in that sense, it made a lot of sense for Solomon to do things like that. However, we also know from our tradition that it was a huge problem for Solomon. Why? Because all of those wives were pagan, necessarily. They were from surrounding countries, and we were the only monotheists at that time in that area. So what does that mean? Well, the wives were worshiping primarily Baal and other gods and idols. And so what does Solomon do? The wife comes in and says, "Oh, sweetheart, come worship with me today. Let's go to my synagogue. Let's go to my temple today, and let's do that." And what is Solomon to do? "Oh, okay, sweetheart, we'll go." Right? And so Solomon goes, and he worships with all his wives at these pagan places. You can understand God's really, really not happy with that. And so Solomon, in our tradition, Solomon is known as the wise king, because we all know the story about splitting the baby. Does anyone not know that story? Okay, good. So we all know that story. And so from that, Solomon is this wise king. Solomon was not liked at all during his reign, and Solomon violated rules for the king from the Torah. And what do those rules say about for a king? Anybody know? A king cannot have many wives. A king cannot go to Egypt to get horses. Good, yes. A king cannot amass a lot of money. And a king must be from Israel. A king must be an Israelite. He must be a Jewish king, and he has to descend from David's line. Okay, well, clearly Solomon is Jewish. He descends from David. That part is taken care of. But let's look at the other three. Solomon has many wives. That violates Torah law. Solomon absolutely goes back to Egypt and gets a lot of horses for his army. Violates Torah law. Solomon amasses huge amounts of money. Why? Because Solomon takes David's little kingdom and enlarges it. How does he do that? He builds and builds and builds and builds. Not only does he build, he conscripts the Israelites to do the building, and he conscripts them into the army. So you can imagine the Israelites like, no, we don't like this guy. He's making us work to build things. He's putting us in the army. He's taxing the out of us. No, we don't like this guy so much. Which is why when Solomon dies, we all know the kingdom splits into two. Because the aristocrats from the kingdom, when Solomon's son Rehoboam comes to the throne and he gets all the elders and the aristocrats together because he's the brand new king, and he says, okay, guys, what do we got going on here? And the aristocrats say, look, we don't want the same policies as your father. Are you going to do the same things to us that your father did to us? And Rehoboam says, let me think for a second. Yes. And the aristocrats say, oh, okay, we're out of here. And they secede. And we have then the northern kingdom and we have the southern kingdom. Okay. So, that's a long way around, possibly from the many wives, but that would be, in my opinion, a little difficult because Israel is up here, right? How did all of these Jews get to here? I think it's more likely that there were, most Jews lived within the kingdom until when? 580, very good, until about 586 when the Babylonians destroy Solomon's temple. So 586 is 600. So from 970 to 600, there must have been clearly some Jews who left the kingdom. And they were wandering around, and there were some of them. Were there traders along the Mediterranean? Yes, I think there were. I think there were. Were there, Joette asked me, were there traders along the Mediterranean? Thank you. Yes, I believe there were. And so some Jews left the kingdom, but the vast majority were within the kingdom until Solomon's temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. Okay.
Rabbi, it kind of makes a lot of sense. The fact that during Solomon's time, there were Jews spread out because it was a rich time and they had business throughout the Mediterranean. So enterprising Jews could have very well
Good.
gone all around the north coast of Africa.
Yes, so Ziesul says it makes sense that there would be some Jews who left because Solomon's time was a very rich time for Jews, and it makes sense that certain enterprising Jews would have left for more opportunities along the Mediterranean coast. That makes sense, yes. By the 4th century BCE, 4th century. So what is the 4th century? From 400 to 300. This is the 4th century right there. By the 4th century, so that's the 300s. Now think very carefully. That should go ding, 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 ding. What happened in the 300s BCE? Remember, I love to go like major dates, like 400, 300, 600. 300s is Alexander the Great marches through the ancient world. And Alexander the Great conquers vast territories. Right? Alexander the Great's empire, all here and up in here into Turkey.
Right into India.
Into India as well. Very good. So what happens after Alexander dies? Good. It splits up. Who said that? Very good. It splits up.
What is that word?
It splits up. The question was, what happens after Alexander's empire dies? And the answer is it splits up. So we have in here the Middle East. We have up here Turkey. Okay, so what goes on when it splits up? Alexander had 5 generals underneath him, his 5 major generals. And to make a very long story very short, the 5 quickly become 2. All of Alexander's empire gets divided up among those 5 generals. But very quickly, 2 out of the 5 take lots of territory, and so it ends up as 2. And his general, Ptolemy, takes all the western half of the empire, and his general Seleucus takes the eastern half of the empire. And the first Ptolemy installs himself as Pharaoh of Egypt because Alexander had conquered Egypt. So we call this the Ptolemaic dynasty within Egypt. All of those pharaohs were Greek. None was Egyptian. The last of the Greek pharaohs, last of the Ptolemaic pharaohs, was Cleopatra. Cleopatra was 100% Greek. 100% Greek. Apparently she spoke Egyptian as well. She was 100% Greek. And the Ptolemaic dynasty ends with her. So what happens is that Ptolemy gets this part, Seleucus gets this part. Israel is right in the middle, and everybody wants Israel. Why does everybody want Israel? Here's Europe up here. Yes, Cecil. Simply because it's a passageway to the entire Middle East. Hell yes. Yes, that's exactly right. It is right at the crossroads of everything. In order to get from here to here, you go through Israel. In order to get from here to here, you go through Israel. It's right in the center of everything. So everybody wants it. Ptolemy gets it in the beginning, and then Seleucus wants it. This is our whole story of the Maccabees and Hanukkah. The Greek Seleucids want Israel, so they go after Jerusalem and they take it. And then the Maccabees revolt, we get the Temple Mount back. That's our story of Hanukkah. So remember when we're in Hebrew school and we learned the evil Antiochus, the 4th Epiphanes, or Antiochus, as some of us learned it. Antiochus was the Seleucid king of the eastern part of what had been Alexander's empire. And they want Jerusalem, they want Israel, just like Ptolemy had wanted it, and he conquers it. Okay, so Ptolemy invades what is now Israel, and Egypt then gets a large Jewish population. Many Jews were, in fact, carried off as slaves by Ptolemy and captives, but they were later freed. And by 312, Ptolemy had settled many, many Jews in Cyrenaica. Cyrenaica is the eastern part of Libya. So there were a lot of Jews living here. And Ptolemy, following the Egyptian army taking Jews as slaves and captives and then freeing them later on, became pretty tolerant of Jews. So many of those Jews, as I said, settled in the eastern half of Libya and became loyal to Ptolemy. So why did he want the Jews there? Because now he had a population of people who were backing him because he was tolerant. So it strengthened his hold on Libya. By 146 BCE, the climate had become so good for Jews in Libya that there were some wealthy, established Jewish communities in the eastern half of Libya, and we know that from some inscriptions, archaeological inscriptions that have been found. During the Roman period, so remember that Alexander marches through the ancient world around 300. He dies very shortly thereafter. The Maccabees take over around 165. And as we move forward in history, Rome is on the ascent. After the Maccabees take over, we have in Israel, I'm just using the word Israel, it wasn't called that back then, we all know that, but for us to have a sense. What happens after that, around 165, is the Maccabees begin their ascent. A little shortly after that, Rome becomes ascendant, and then we have the Hasmonean dynasty. And the Hasmonean dynasty was a dynasty of Maccabees, basically. And that goes all the way up to Herod in just before the year 0, like around 30-something before the year 0. So we have now the Roman... Certainly. Yes. It was under different emperors. It was called different things. It becomes Syria Palestina at one point under Hadrian as we move forward in history. Palestina, why? Because Palestine derived from the word Philistine, and the Philistines were our most notorious enemies biblically, and so what Hadrian wanted to do was humiliate us. We're going to call your land after your worst enemy. How about that? Up until that time, it's called so we had the northern kingdom destroyed in 721. We had the southern kingdom taken in 586. So we're past that now. We're past time on that. It's Judea now under the Romans. So the southern kingdom with Jerusalem is now called Judea at this time in history. Sure. Good question. There are never bad questions. So ask questions. Yes?
I was afraid this is a bad question.
Not a bad question.
Who are the Maccabees?
Oh, good. Who are the Maccabees? Okay. So, once the Seleucids, the Greek Syrians, take over Jerusalem and Judea, then there are a group of conservative religious priests, basically, who live in the city of Modin, and they were led by Judah Maccabee. And this group wanted to take the temple back from Seleucus, from Antiochus Epiphanes IV, the Seleucid emperor at the time. And there was a problem going on from within Judaism as well. And that is assimilation. And the Greeks previously, under Alexander the Great, had come in and spread Greek ideas. Philosophy, I don't know, maybe togas, maybe gyros, whatever, Greek food, Greek, and a little bit of the Greek gods. Probably astrology as well. Physical games, good. Wrestling, okay. Okay, Ken's giving me an updated information. What are we doing? Sinai, Philistia, yes. Or Gaza, that's Gaza right now. Philistia, from the Philistines, yes.
Yes, same area.
Same area, absolutely. And so the aristocrats, Jewish aristocrats at the time, thought, ooh, these Greeks are pretty swanky. I like this stuff. These togas, I like whatever it was. And many took Greek last names, and many became, as Joette pointed out, sort of assimilated. They liked the Greek stuff. And they're thinking, well, these Jews, they're kind of backwards. these other peasant guys, they're kind of backwards. I like this new Greek stuff. This is cool. And the Maccabees came in and said, what are you people doing? You're Jews. Get rid of this stuff. Cut it out. Start acting like Jews. So it was an attempt to purify from within, as well as stop Antiochus Epiphanes IV armies from invading and taking Jerusalem and Judea. And what ends up happening is, as we all know, they fight the Greek Syrian army, and they get the Temple Mount back. What we're not told in Hebrew school, we think, oh, this is a huge, glorious victory. We defeated the Greek Syrians. Oh my, no. The Greek Syrian army was enormous. The Maccabees were a little group of guys, right? And so what they did was they did win the battle for Jerusalem, and they got the temple back. And yes, it was really big for us, and we need to celebrate it, and it was wonderful, and it's a great thing. But we didn't win the war. We would eventually, about 100 years later, beat the Greek Syrian army completely. But our story of Hanukkah is about a little battle for Jerusalem that we won. But I don't care. It's a great story. It's our story, and we celebrate. What year was the temple rebuilt? It was destroyed in 586 BCE. It never gets rebuilt after 70 CE. So when was the second temple built? Very good. Jews are allowed to go back to Judea from captivity in Babylon when? Cyrus, Ezra, around 538. So we leave in 586. We're exiled. Some of us come back in 538. Most of us stay in Babylon. 538 approximately, and we begin work on the second temple immediately. And so then what happens? We have some kind of a temple some kind of a temple is built. We're told in our tradition that the old men who saw Solomon's temple, when this new temple was built, they started crying. They wept. And all of us think, oh, because they were so happy to see a new temple. Nah. They cried because it was a little shack compared to what Solomon's temple had been. They cried, oh my God, this is our new temple? But Solomon's temple was incredible. This is what we have now? Oh God. And that temple continues up till Herod, when he does the great shul remodeling. and he makes that little second temple this grand second temple that we all know about because of the models in the gift shop. All right. So during the Roman period, Augustus grants the Jews of Cyrenaica privileges through the general Flavius. By 73 CE, so now we are here. We are 3 years after the temple had been destroyed by the Romans. We're not happy about that. Jews are not happy about that. So what do we do? We start a war. And we have the first Jewish-Roman war. Now, it's important to know that during the Second Temple period, from 538, why do I keep taking this off? From 538 all the way up here, we had many different ways for people to be Jewish. They expressed their Judaism. There were Pharisees, there were Sadducees, there were Zealots who were fighting Rome, and there were Essenes out in the desert. And then as we get closer here, I'm going to add, Josephus tells us there were 4. I'm going to add a 5th. We had Nazarenes. We had Jews for Jesus, who identified themselves completely as Jewish. And Jesus identified himself completely as Jewish. These were not Christians. That hadn't happened yet. These were Jews who were following their rabbi, Jesus, and who was preaching something different from what the temple hierarchy believed. All right, so we had the first Jewish-Roman war in 73 CE. Masada had already happened. The Zealots made their last stand in 65, and then there was a regrouping to fight the Romans. What happened was there was a revolt in Cyrenaica of Libyan Jews, and it was quickly put down by the Romans, who killed many Jews. Again, in 115, we have the Kitos War, Kitos, the Kitos War, which was another Jewish revolt. And there were revolts in Libya, there were revolts in Egypt, and those were put down as well. Then we tried again with Bar Kokhba in 135. Remember, Bar Kokhba was a general, and he got out a group of Jewish mercenaries to go against the Roman army. And they had some early limited success. You know, they did guerrilla warfare. 10 or 15 of them were hiding in a trench, and they were, and whatever. They were doing their warfare, and they would, like, be a real pain in the tuchus to some of the Roman troops. And then Rome got really tired of it, and they sent in the entire legions from Rome, and Bar Kokhba got crushed. And it was at that time, this is Rabbi Akiva as well, at that time in 135, this was the time when we realized, oh, this is it. We're not, this is it. We're done. We're finished. We're not going anywhere. We're never going to get our kingdom back. We're never going to get a king back. We're done. This is also the time when Akiva started thinking about why is it that good people sometimes have terrible things that happen to them, and bad people seem to get away with stuff? Because the point, Akiva thought Bar Kokhba was the Messiah. And then, of course, he's put to death by the Romans. And and so the thought begins to come into Jewish tradition about good and evil, and what Akiva said was, maybe it's that bad people, if they get away with their stuff in this world, get punished in the next world, in the Olam Haba, the world that is to come. And maybe if you're a good person in this world and you don't get your reward in this world, your reward comes in the Olam Haba. Remember that for all of our history, until the rabbis, Judaism does not have any, certainly biblically, and then it creeps in over time. Judaism does not have nothing about what happens after we die. Zero. In the Torah, there's one curious incident with the witch of Endor, which suggests that maybe part of our essence survives after we die, but it's a little tiny thing. And then there's one sentence in our Bible, there's one sentence at the end of the book of Daniel, which speaks about resurrection of the dead. And so those ideas are starting to creep into Jewish tradition. But for most of our tradition, Judaism says nothing about after we die. Why? Because Judaism didn't care. It was about how do we live. The entire Torah is a prescription for how do you live as a decent human being in the world. Here's what you do. Here's what you do not do. And this makes you a decent, righteous person in the world. But it should not surprise any of us that these ideas creep into our tradition. After all, we were slaves in Egypt. What did Egypt know about the afterlife? Well, they had a huge tradition of afterlife, right? The pharaohs are buried with all of their accoutrements. Thank God, that's how we have King Tut's riches. Everything for their pleasure in the next world. And so that was to the west. Where were we in the east? We were in Babylonia. What was the religion of Babylonia? Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism has a huge belief in the resurrection of the dead. So we got it from both sides. How could it not creep into our tradition? We brought it from Egypt. We brought it from Babylonia. So it became, we absorbed it. Everyone else believes this. Okay, well, we believe it too now. And then we brought in the idea of a disembodied soul, the idea that the body returns to earth and the soul returns to God. It's way more complicated than that, but that basic idea we brought in from where? Plato. How did we get it from Plato? Alexander the Great brought it to us in the 300s. And then the rabbis, remember, the rabbis are coming after, many, many, many hundreds of years later, in 70 CE. And then the rabbis are looking at these ideas, and they're thinking, okay, this is good, this is, not so much on that one, but this is good, okay, we can accept this one. This one doesn't conflict with Jewish ideas, all right, okay. So the rabbis were very conscientious about seeing which ideas were in alignment with Jewish thought and which ideas had to be rejected. And then, of course, when we get to it down the road, in the year 1500 CE comes the Kabbalah and reincarnation. And so those are the three ideas in Judaism about what happens after you die: resurrection of the dead, disembodied soul, or reincarnation. And as a Jew, you can decide which of those three works for you, because all three are authentic ideas from our tradition and can be found in our sacred texts. What you can't do and remain authentic is to say, well, I think I become a star when I die. Okay, well, you can believe that if you want, but that's not Jewish. It's not Jewish. So we have 3 authentic beliefs within Judaism from which you can choose. Very good, very good. The fact that the rabbis were so open to incorporate new ideas, any clue why that might have been?
Well, I would think that maybe the people were starting to move in that direction.
The people were starting to move in that direction. You get a gold star. So, what happened? You get a gold star for asking the question, and you get a gold star for answering the question. And you get a gold star, and you get a gold star, and you get a gold star. We'll do Oprah today. Yes. Participation. Yes. Yes. Everybody gets a gold star for being here today asking good questions. Okay. So, yes, following Alexander's spread of Greek influence into the ancient world, Jews were already starting to believe and practice some of these things. And so at some point, the rabbis had to look and say, I think this is an uphill battle. We're not going to win this. And as long as it was or could be consistent with Jewish thought, the rabbi said, okay, we'll allow that in. Joette. Correct. That's exactly right. So what Joette said is that her late husband, Marv, used to say that when new ideas came to Judaism, the rabbis would Judaize it. They would take a foreign idea and make it Jewish to fit into Jewish tradition. And that is 100% true with the spread of Hellenism, Greek thought throughout the Jewish empire. Yes?
Christians did the same thing. They didn't want people to celebrate Saturnalia, and you get Christmas instead.
Christians did the same thing. They didn't want to celebrate Saturnalia, so they made it Christmas instead. I think we all do this. We all, this is, that's a good idea. Let's bring that in. Okay. So, what do I want to talk about? Yeah. Okay, here's where I want to go. Okay, so when the Ottoman Empire takes over the Byzantine Empire, Jewish families in Tripoli and Benghazi, Jewish families are found mostly in Tripoli and Benghazi. Tripoli here and Benghazi here. So let's talk about this for a second, because this is super important. The Ottoman Empire takes over Turkey. Turkey had been the Byzantine Empire. We've all heard that word before, but we're trying to figure out, okay, well, what does that mean? The Byzantine Empire. Okay. When the Romans conquer so much of the ancient world, we know that Constantine, who's around 300 CE, he converts to Christianity, and then his successor, Theodosius I, converts the entire Roman Empire as the official religion to Christianity. So, what happened under Constantine is that there was a western half of the Roman Empire and an eastern half of the Roman Empire. The eastern half of the Roman Empire had a capital in where? Byzantium, which is renamed Constantinople, which is today Istanbul. Very good. The western part of the empire had a capital in Rome. Very good. So you had two capitals. You had the western half in Rome, about here, and you had the eastern half in Constantinople. Okay. What happens in the western half is that the empire goes till about 400 CE, 100 years later. And why? Because invasions by the Goths end the Western Roman Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire, which has now been renamed to the Byzantine Empire, continues all the way up to 1400s when the Ottoman Turks conquer it. The western half ends around 400. It gets reconstituted around 800 under Charlemagne, and it becomes the Holy Roman Empire. And if this is Europe, here's Spain and France. The Holy Roman Empire is here, with Germany in the center. Okay, that will become important in about 10 seconds. Oh, no, it won't. It's 10:50. How could this time go so fast? Oh my gosh. Okay, take another minute. Let me get through. This is like a 3 or 4 minute conversation, but what happens is Jews begin to arrive from Italy in 1745. 1745. Why are Jews leaving Italy? Because what had happened in the previous years, 1618 to 1648, is the 30-year war in Europe. Now, a lot of us don't really know much about the 30 Years' War. It's like, well, we know World War I, World War II. 30 Years' War was the war, European war, that had the most casualties of any war in European history. And it was fought between the Protestant House of Habsburg ruling the Holy Roman Empire and the Catholic House of France, the Bourbon Empire. The Bourbon House of France, excuse me, not the Bourbon Empire. The Bourbon House of France. And so we had the Habsburg versus the Bourbons. And they fought a 30-year war between Protestants and Catholics. It ended in what was called the Peace of Westphalia. Westphalia is a city in Germany. And the end result was that the Habsburg Empire here, which had been very, very strong, had to give up some stuff in the Peace of Westphalia. So they became less strong, and the Catholics of France became stronger. As a result of Protestantism and Catholicism fighting each other, Italy being right down here, increased anti-Semitism against Jews, because both Protestants and Catholics had a serious problem with Jews. We're talking 1618 to 1648. What had happened just previously to that was in the 1500 is a really good way for us to remember. 1500, 3 huge things happen in the world. Inquisition, printing press, and the Kabbalah in in what is now northern Israel, right? So we had three huge events in the right around the 1500s. And also, what happens in the 1500s? The Protestant Reformation. That's huge. And we know that Luther was a rabid anti-Semite. He didn't start out that way. Luther thought that, okay, I've got this new thing, Protestantism. Okay, I'm going to present it to the Jews. They're going to love this, and they're going to all convert. And so Luther went to the Jews and said, what do you think about this? And the Jews said, no. In exactly the same way, right? When Muhammad came along in 600, Muhammad said, oh, I like these Jews. They're monotheistic. They don't worship graven images, all this kind of stuff. And he goes to the Jews. He says, you know what? I got this great new religion. The archangel Gabriel gave it to me in a cave. What do you think of this? And Muhammad told them, and you know, we have this story, and Abraham, he's about to sacrifice Ishmael, and the Jewish elders are, no, that's not the way the narrative goes. That's not the story. No. And Muhammad said, what do you mean that's not the story? No, that's not the story. What are you talking about? That's the story. Gabriel told it to. No, it's not the story. And so, at that point, Muhammad gets very mad. In the same way, as we just talked about, that Luther comes to the Jews and says, okay, you're all going to convert now, right? No. And then he said some vile, vile, vile things. So, last thing for today, remember, 1500 is a very, 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 very important date for world history and for Jewish history. 1500 is the printing press. Perhaps the greatest invention in the history of humankind. Internet could rival it, but obviously. We had the Kabbalah in northern, what is today Israel. We had the Protestant Reformation. And what was the fourth that we talked about? The Inquisition, 1492, right? So we had... And the Americas, 1492. Columbus sails the... Yes, and the Americas. Okay, so that brings us to the mid-1700s in Libya, which we will pick up again next week. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we pray that events in Israel will somehow, please God, work them out to some peaceful solution. Please God, get our people back from the tunnels, and please allow Israel to vanquish this horrible, horrible terrorist group.
So good to see everybody. Good morning to those remote and those present. Did everybody grab the cookies and coffee that you would like? Okay, then we're ready to begin. I'd like to invite you to join with me in the blessing for learning. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. It's so good to be together. And I think that this is one of the highlights of my week. And I know from listening into the end of the class that you just finished that it's a wonderful awakening of the Jewish world, and hopefully this is also a good awakening of the texts of our people. So remember last week we went through all of the different texts, or most of the different texts that are part of the Jewish legal and literary tradition. So we talked also about the fact that we would be moving today into a discussion of women in the Talmud. Don't worry, it won't take up 10 weeks, unfortunately, or anything like that. It's a few particular women. And last week, I started by the end of the class to talk to you about probably the main woman in the Talmud. Her name was Beruria. I think I told you that she was the daughter of Rabbi Ben Tradion, who isn't mentioned all that many times in the Talmud. However, I mentioned to you that he was a martyr for our people, and that if you next Yom Kippur take a look at the Eila Ezkara service, the martyrology, you'll see information about Ben Tradion and what happened to him. So it's interesting to do this because these were real people. Sometimes we read about these people in our texts, and they're so long ago that there's really no way of creating a real humanness to them. But one of the absolute beauties of the Talmud is actually exactly the humanness of it. So today, when we take a look at the stories of Beruria, both uplifting and sad, we'll have the opportunity to see that this woman who was married to a very, very powerful rabbi, Rabbi Meir, was real. And the things that happened to both of them were real. And the best part about it is that Talmud doesn't erase it. One of the wonderful things about our tradition is that we have the good, the bad, and the ugly in all of our texts. That includes the Torah. We see that in the patriarchs and matriarchs and their good points and their shortcomings. We erase nothing. Anything that's ever been erased in the Talmud, I'm just going to say this for a second, then we're going to jump into the text. Everything that's been erased in the Talmud was erased by somebody else. For example, maybe we'll get to this before the end of our class. There are things about Jesus in the Talmud. Now, if we decide to do that, you can tell me if you want to do that. But when we get to those texts, it's a complicated thing. However, we were forced to obliterate that from many Talmud volumes, not by us. So luckily, I think, for the history of the people, some of those Talmud volumes continued to be extinct, even though they weren't able to be used. So we have those texts now. So it's very interesting how much the Talmud puts in. No, we're going to jump in first.
It's just about the Cairo Knesset. Is some of the stuff we get is from
None of those particular things that I just pointed out come from the Cairo Geniza. However, many, many, many other documents do. That's another day's discussion. So I'm going to pass out text to you today, but let me start, not yet. Thanks, Joette. Now I know you're willing to do it. So here's a text from the Talmud about Rabbi Meir and how important he was as a person. That's her husband, right? We talked last week about the two Talmuds, the Jerusalem Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud, and that the Babylonian Talmud came about after the exile of the Jews, and they took away almost all the leadership out of Israel and plopped them in Babylonia. And so obviously academies grew up. And I also told you that when it was time to go back to Israel, some people kind of liked living in Babylonia, so they stayed there. But this is the Talmudic text. I'm going to do it in English because our focus is brewery, but I want you to have the background. The world remained desolate. Why? From the perspective of Talmud, why was the world desolate? What had happened? The temple was destroyed. Until Rabbi Akiva came to our masters in the south and taught the Torah to them, and it was they who revived the Torah at that time. South was Babylonia. They were Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Judah, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuah. So Rabbi Meir is looked at as a rabbi who helped revive the whole tradition after a disaster. So that's what we know about him. And here's a couple of funky things about him, because I thought you would enjoy it. I'm just so that you know, when it comes to Talmud, last year on Shabbat, I taught Secrets of the Rabbis, because I like the funky things in the Talmud, the unusual things. So I'll share those with you as well. But this is a lovely thing. There's a story of a woman who came to the Beit Midrash of Rabbi Meir and said, Rabbi, one of you in this whole school has taken me as their wife by having sex with me. That was one of the ways you got married. But it looks like what she was saying is that this really wasn't her idea. So Rabbi Meir stood and gave her a get, a bill of divorce, and afterwards he required that every one of the students in that house of study wrote a get for her as well, because he didn't want her to be stuck. So now that's a piece of Rabbi Meir that you see that was compassionate. Nobody would be embarrassed, and she would be free.
So did that imply that maybe she could have had sex with any of?
No, I think what that implied is that he wasn't going to do a whole exploration of who was responsible for this, because the issue wasn't doing that and embarrassing her. The issue was freeing her.
I see.
So she wouldn't be stuck. Because in Jewish law, as it exists, the man has to give her a get. So
Sounds
we
like
all.
They were protecting the men to me. Because they didn't have to pick out the man who was responsible.
No, in that particular case, it wouldn't protect the man, because men can marry as many women as they want in that generation. It's absolutely, completely protecting her.
Okay, I'll buy your story.
Yeah, you need to buy my story, because there are a lot of other really good stories that are similar to that. Okay, so here's a bad part about him, because we'll see other issues with him. He used to ridicule sexual transgressors. That's not a bad thing, necessarily. If they're transgressing, the rabbi had a right, the head rabbi had a right to, chastise them. But one day, Satan is not a Christian Satan. Satan is like the evil inclination that everybody has. So it's not the same as a Christian view of Satan, because that's separate from God. In Judaism, everything, the good, the bad, everything about us doesn't come from a separate entity. It comes from God, right? And we have free will, so that's where we do the bad stuff and the good stuff. Anyway, he appeared to him as a woman standing on the opposite bank of a river. As there was no bridge to go across the river, Rabbi Meir grabbed a rope and proceeded to cross. Why did he do that? What? He wanted to get to her. So there was some inclination that was pulling him to get across that river no matter what. When he reached halfway along the rope, Satan, resuming his usual form, whatever that was, let him go, saying, "Had they not proclaimed in heaven, 'Beware of Rabbi Meir and his Torah,' I would now have valued your life at no more than 2 mea," which is a little tiny bit of value. So Satan, was letting Rabbi Meir, who used to ridicule a whole bunch of people, know that he wasn't so perfect either. And so that reawoke Rabbi Meir to know, I better get my stuff together because this was a big lesson, okay? So I hope you don't mind that I read this to you. We have something now to pass out to, so that you can see who Bruria was. She's obviously married to a very strong, very well-respected person who's not perfect, like all the rest of us. This is actually verbatim from the Torah.
You want me to take?
Sure. The faster, the better. And you know I don't pass them out in advance. So far, so good? Is it interesting enough to you?
I don't, yeah.
Okay. So somebody grab a mic and read the beginning of this. I'll be stopping people who are reading.
Here, take this one. Let me put my glasses on so I can,
Okay, you can stand there.
okay. Shall I start?
Yes.
Rabbi Simlai came before Rabbi Yohanan. He said to him, "Would the master teach me the book of genealogies?" The book of genealogies was a collection of
Tanaitic, so let me stop there. There were 2 generations of rabbis who were involved in the Torah. The Tanaim were the first group of rabbis. So that's what Tana means.
How do you say that again?
Tanaitic.
Tanaitic?
Tanaitic. Go on.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
Teachings that formed a midrash on the book of Chronicles. Rabbi Yonan said to him, "Where are you from?" He said to him, "From Lod." Rabbi Yonan further asked, "And where is your present place of residence?" He said to him, "In Nehardea." Rabbi Yonan said to him, "I have a tradition that we teach these subjects neither to Luddites nor to Nahardaeans, and certainly not to you who comes from Lod, and your residence is in Nehardea. such as that you both have shortcomings.
Okay, so now we see the bias of the guy, but that's not the important part of this text.
Okay.
But I thought you'd find it funny. Nah, not going to teach you. We don't like people who come from these places. So go on.
Rabbi Simlai pressured Rabbi Yonanan until he agreed to teach him. Rabbi Simlai said to him, "Teach me the book of genealogies in 3 months." Rabbi Yohanan took a clod of dirt, threw it at him, and said to him, "Beruria, wife of Rabbi Meir and daughter of Rabbi Hananiah ben Teradon, was so sharp and had such a good memory that she learned 300 halakot in one day from 300 sages, and nonetheless she did not fulfill her responsibility to properly learn the book of genealogies in 3 years, because it is especially long and difficult. And you say that I should teach it to you in 3 months? After your inappropriate request, I am not inclined to teach you at all."
Okay.
Oh boy.
So it's a funny text, but it's an important text on a lot of different levels. The ones that aren't about Bruria, the levels that are not about Bruria, is that this is a very clear, brief thing from Pesachim, which is mostly about what? Pesach. It's mostly a Passover volume of the Talmud, but the rabbis go in and out of all different kinds of conversations. That's part of what they do. And this one basically shows the bias of a teacher of rabbis. I know that some of you read the Rabbi Yochanan texts with me last year, mostly I think about Warren and Melinda and maybe you, Joette. But I might do it again because it's my favorite text with Rabbi Yochanan. So stay tuned for the quirks of Rabbi Yochanan, just that there are a lot of them. But you see that they're saying, I'm not teaching you. You're not good enough. These are real human things. I don't want to. People in your town have proved yourself not to be worthy of these kinds of conversations. So what happens at the end, though? What? He doesn't teach him. But why doesn't he teach him, based on the topic that we're doing today?
Because he holds up Bruria as an example of someone who was way smarter and took longer to learn than this rabbi was willing to put into it.
Yeah. So here, this is a very important text. This is the text, one of the texts you should hold on to, that says, okay, there weren't a lot of women in these texts, but it's not like every single time that the rabbis dealt with women in the Talmud. You hear a lot in books about women were always dissed, they were always said how stupid they were, or that they couldn't do this or they couldn't do that. And that is not true. It is absolutely true that these texts were written, inspired by God, but written by men, and that therefore that was their concern in a society where the genders didn't mix all that much, like on a daily basis for learning and that kind of thing. But it's not true that there's nothing there. There is, and that's why we're doing this over the next couple of weeks. This is a beautiful text where a person very clearly says, what? What does he say? I don't want to just speak at you.
You're not worth the time because you don't understand what it is you're getting into.
But who did he say that to?
To the other rabbi.
Yeah, to a man.
Yeah.
And who does he use as the example of excellence? Bruria. So I don't know whether you're going to keep this text or not, but it's really important. They did their judgment a lot based on people's drive to learn. And she absolutely had the drive to learn. But other things happened too. So first, let's go to text number 2 that I'm passing out to you. It's interesting. Do you think it's interesting? I have to keep checking. Pass both of those out. Now, this is a text called Bruria Teaches Her Husband, Rabbi Meir. And since we already talked about the power of Rabbi Meir, it's very important that he was married to somebody that could be, also a teacher to him. Let me know when everybody has it. Anybody over there not have it? Okay. I'm going to read this, but you have it to look at. With regard to the statement of Rabbi Yehuda, son of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, that David, that's King David, did not say hallelujah until he saw the downfall of the wicked, this is a story that Gemara, remember, it's Mishnah and Gemara that make Talmud. Okay. There were these hooligans in Rabbi Meir's neighborhood who caused him a great deal of anguish. Ever had neighbors that cause you anguish? In Los Angeles, we have a lot of hooligans that cause anguish. Rabbi Meir prayed for God to have mercy on them that they should die. Rabbi Meir's wife, Bruria, said to him, "What is your thinking? On what basis do you pray for the death of these hooligans? Do you base yourself on the verse as it is written, 'Let sins cease from the land' in Psalms, which you interpret to mean that the world would be better if the wicked were destroyed? But is it written, 'Let sinners cease'?" In the text, it says, what does it say from Psalms? "Let sins cease from the land." So she says to him, is it written, "Let sinners cease"? "Let sins cease" is written. One should pray for an end to their transgressions, not for the demise of the transgressors themselves. Moreover, go to the end of the verse where it says, "And the wicked will be no more." If, as you suggest, transgressions shall cease refers to the demise of the evildoers, how is it possible that the wicked will be no more? For example, that there will no longer be evil. In other words, people do evil. If you destroy them, there is no evil to do away with in the way that the text says. Rather, pray for God to have mercy on them, that they should, what? Repent. Tshuva. Do tshuva, as if they repent, then the wicked will be no more, as they will have repented, not because we did away with them. Rabbi Meir saw that Bruria was correct, and he prayed for God to have mercy on them, and they repented. The Gemara relates an additional example of Bruria's incisive insight. A certain heretic, you know what a heretic is? A non-believer, right, said to Bruria, "It is written, 'Sing, barren woman who has not given birth, open forth in song and cry. You did not travail, for more are the children of the desolate than the children of this married wife, said the Lord. Because she has not given birth, she should sing and rejoice." Bruria responded to this heretic's mockery and said, "Fool, go to the end of the verse where it is written, 'For the children of the desolate shall be more numerous than the children of the married wife,' said the Lord. Rather, what is the meaning of sing, barren woman who has not given birth? It means sing, congregation of Israel, which is like a barren woman who did not give birth to children who are destined for Gehenna like you. So let's talk about that for a minute. The issue isn't really what the heretic was talking about and what Bruria was talking about. What did she use to try and tell this man that he was dead wrong in his interpretation?
She used an interpretation of the song.
Right, she used the text. She used the text. So she was able to go to this person who basically was saying about Jewish women, you're barren for all these different reasons, and women have difficulty giving birth, and you should just own that. That's what it means to sing and rejoice about it. Just know that your women are substandard and they should just live with it. That's basically the interpretation of what the heretic said. And then she said, no. In the end, the children of the desolate shall be more numerous than the children of the married wife. And you know who is the desolate? It is the congregation of Israel. Why was that? What generation was she in? What had Rabbi Meir just done? Remember the first thing I read to you? The world remained desolate until what?
Revitalized.
So her husband was one of the rabbis who revitalized study, and she's saying this doesn't mean that we are dead in the water and that our families aren't going to thrive again. On the contrary, it says the people who went through these kinds of things, they will grow up and have an even better life than before. Does that make any sense to you? The texts are funky, but she wasn't even afraid of talking to somebody who was in the business of disrupting the peace of Jewish life. So we've got Bruria, a person who had a father who was a rabbi, who married a very important rabbi, who was able to be lauded by the rabbis for her scholarship, who was able to teach her husband when she thought her husband was on the wrong track. And what happens at the end? He doesn't say to her, like the rabbi does, like the rabbi does in the text, no, go away. You don't have anything to teach me. Instead, he says, you're right. So we have those things. But now let's get to a couple of other things that are a little bit more difficult. Because, no relationships are perfect, right? So here, this comes from Midrash, and I didn't provide it with you today, but maybe when you hear it, some of you will recognize it. So what do you think of Bruria so far? She has a mind of her own. She's strong. Not intimidated. Hey, folks.
Very smart.
Doesn't that remind you of most Jewish women? So, what? Yeah, well, that's a human thing, right? But the fact that he listens means that he strongly respects her. She's highly educated, which a lot of women didn't get the opportunity to be. I mean, she's fortunate. She grew up in a household where her father did not prevent her from learning. So that's all good. But we get to some of the more, this is another wonderful thing of Bruria, this story. And I know some of you have heard it. But we'll get to an even more difficult one. Bruria was the learned and compassionate wife of Rabbi Meir. While Rabbi Meir was teaching on a Shabbat afternoon, both of his sons died from the plague that was affecting their city. When Rabbi Meir returned home, he asked his wife, "Where are our sons?" She handed him the cup for Havdalah, and he said the blessing. Wait. Again he asked, "Where are our sons?" She brought food for him, and he ate. When he had finished eating, Bruria said to her husband, "My teacher, I have a question. A while ago, a man came and deposited something precious in my keeping. Now he has come back to claim what he left. Should I return it to him or should I not? Meir responded, "Is not the one who holds a deposit required to return it to its owner?" Jewish law. So she took his hand and led him to where their two children lay. He began to weep, crying, "My sons, my sons." She comforted him, and she said, "Adonai natan ve'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach." And we say that up until this day. God gives, and God takes away. May the name of God be blessed. And we say it at every single Jewish traditional funeral. So even in that time, so this is a midrash. So midrashim, as I told you last week, they're stories that either come to explain a law or come to explain a text. I told you that there was midrash halacha, legal midrash, and there's midrash agadah, stories about life that explain things. Which one is this midrash? A legal midrash or a story midrash? Story. So that also means that while it's a midrash and possibly, probably, there was some kind of loss or something in their family, we will never know for sure whether that's really what happened to Bruria's and Rabbi Meir's children. It is described by rabbis and scholars as being something that's real. And that happened, and the midrash part of it is her explanation to him. So what do you think about that midrash? What do you think? Do you think it teaches something that was important for people to know who were going through grief?
Well, if there was a plague, as you mentioned, then that would be comforting not just to Rabbi Meir, but to other people in the community who were dealing with the same thing.
So what was just said was that if there was a plague going on, as it says in this text, it becomes something that's more comforting to people who are experiencing loss, that our lives are all on loan. Yeah. Any other comments that you have about this? It's beautiful, though, isn't it? What? I don't know exactly where they were living. I can't tell you that. But I can't. I don't know it offhand.
If Rabbi Meir was reinvigorating Torah study,
Right.
were they
In Babylonia.
in Babylonia
Yeah.
somewhere?
Yeah. So, any other comments on this? And this was one of the first midrashim I ever learned. And it's because it's something that every human being, I think, can relate to. Yes?
To comfort her husband.
Right. Exactly. She was comforting her husband. Maybe? Well, they believe in an afterlife for sure. As does Judaism, by the way. We don't learn about that very often. Did you have something you wanted to say?
It's not comforting, not a bit comforting.
Okay.
If you put it in your mind, those are your sons laying there. Is that comforting to you? No.
I guess it depends on. What was said is, it's not comforting. If those are your two children, it's not going to be comforting. And, they live in a much more faithful time, which is why she could say this. Because with all those people is God, and God doesn't do anything that is inexplicable. It does things that are inexplicable, but they trust in God.
Is that all the way till now?
What?
God doesn't do, is it all the way in our time today, now?
It's a matter of faith. People will say, we don't understand why these things happen, but we believe that God exists and that God knows better than we. Now, let me say one thing and then I'll get you. I'm so sorry. Because that came up in the conversation. A lot of people in the modern age say, how can we believe that anymore because of the Shoah, right? Because of the Holocaust. Where was God? But let me tell you, that's not a new thing for Judaism. These kinds of upheavals and destruction have been happening all the way through time. It really is much more a common, and people came out of the Shoah, some of them feeling very connected still with God, and some people who said, I'm done with God, and that's the end of that. But there are a lot of people who work out of a sense of faith that we as human beings don't understand everything that happens. But what I think Bruria was really trying to do is quietly bring this to her husband. What did you want to say?
I think that, I agree with the statement that you just made, and I was taken with that. She was so gently getting his mind to think in another way, not even knowing what she was going to show him afterwards. But he was weeping afterwards, so he was allowed his grieving and his sorrow and his pain.
That's a good point. Thank
So
you.
that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think that the people who have a sense of faith, it doesn't mean that they don't go through terrible times. I mean, look, we're doing this now, right? We're doing this now. But some of the kibbutzim that were hit in the South were religious kibbutzim. And so people who are religious have different kinds of ways of working through it. And here's the thing, folks. We don't know. we as human beings, I say this, I just said this, we're going to get to the last text, but when my mom, Aleha Shalom, was alive, I had a conversation with her about life after this one. And because I served as a chaplain for 17 years, and I was very hesitant about Olam Haba, the world to come. And so as a chaplain, I had experiences that were very hands-on with human beings that made me believe this ain't all there is. So I had the conversation with my mom, and she said, I'm so glad that you can think that. I just cannot wrap my head around it, that there's something beyond this. So I said to her, Mom, you know, you got a 50-50 chance. Either it's true that there is a life after this one, and we'll all discover that one day, or there isn't, and then none of us will know because it won't be like we're disappointed. None of us will know. But I choose faith. I choose faith, even though I know that all of these different things happen and that we don't understand them at all. I'm talking for Leslie Alexander, not trying to be the rabbinic authority here. I choose faith because ultimately I think it makes for a life that feels more at ease. But I can't say that for anybody else, and I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying that's what I choose. So now we're going to do one more text, and I'm going to tell you though what happened. Yes.
I admire Bruria in that she was so gentle in the way she handled it.
She was very gentle in the way she handled it. Okay. So I'm going to tell you the end of the story with Bruria and Rabbi Meir. And if we have, what time is it? 11:47. Okay, so if we have time, then I'm going to do one more thing that will backtrack. But here's the end of the story with Bruria and Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir made a huge mistake. He got jealous of something that wasn't happening. He thought that Bruria was stepping out on him. And he asked one of his students to try and prove that she was doing these things by trying to seduce her over and over and over again. And the text says that she finally fell prey to it. We don't know, and all the rabbinic commentators say, this doesn't seem right. Like, even the rabbinic commentators back in the time say, this doesn't seem right, but it's in the text. And it says that after that, Bruria took her own life, and Rabbi Meir ran away and died. So let me tell you that this conclusion of their story shows up in other forms for other people in the texts. So I think that that's why the rabbis had some kind of question about it. But that's the sad text that's at the end of the story.
She probably did it. She killed herself because she did it.
No.
Or because when you take a person is that well valued in the society, who's a scholar, who's respected, who's quoted, who's listened to, and then you get accused of something, she may have been so ashamed to have been accused like that. So if it really happened, here's the only problem. Suicide is illegal according to Jewish law. God gives you this life. It's your responsibility to live it out and do the best that you can with it. So it's always been really hard for me to believe that a woman so based in Jewish law would end her life that way. So I don't believe it, but it's in the text.
I'm bothered by this because if I understand the story, can I be heard or no?
I'm hoping you can.
Yeah, okay.
There's people who are being streaming.
You
Should I get up?
Okay. Take the mic.
Okay. All right. I say I'm bothered by this story because if I understood the way that you were relating the story, she was being enticed over and over and over again, and I don't think very highly of her husband and getting this over and over. I don't like it, no.
Right. So but folks, it's a real, I mean, whether this happened or not, this is the way Talmud works, which is why bringing Beruria to you as the first text we do is really terrific, actually, because we don't erase anything. And it's up to the scholars, which includes us. Right now, we are scholars of Talmud. It's up to us to yes, we are. It's up to us to make decisions about these texts based on what we learn. Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me?
No, you gotta come up. One of the things about wanting to speak, you gotta grab the mic.
Well, I feel that she had such a bond with her husband, and the fact that he could even accuse her of something like that, she lost faith. She lost faith because how could he do such a thing? I think my take on it is that she did commit suicide rather than live with the man who could think that she would do that. That's my take. That's why there are juries.
Yeah. That's why there are juries.
There is a saying in Spanish, cuando el río suena, algo trae. That means when the river makes noise, it's because it's carrying something. Now, referring to the story of Berura, whether she was stepping out or she's not, I think to give her the benefit of the doubt that being the type of person she was, very educated and strong of mind, maybe she somebody wrong somewhere along the line, because she would tell it as it was, and tongues wag. So I want to give her a pass, in the sense of giving her the benefit of the doubt that what it was said didn't happen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What time are we at? Don't worry about it. This is good.
Okay. I'm taking issue with Rabbi Mayer and the student he enticed to do this. Can you imagine that conversation? You know, if I was a student, he's asking me to do this, my estimation of Rabbi Mayer would go plummet. And the fact that I'm doing it over and over again, you know, both their value systems are in the toilet.
Okay. They didn't have toilets then, but. At least not flushing ones.
How old was he when this
I
happened?
have no idea.
Because I have my husband's relative accused his wife of going out with a postman or something, and he's had Alzheimer's. So it could be that he was out of, not in his right mind anymore.
Well, the Talmud never does record that Rabbi Mayer was going loopy, and they do record it. They do record it for other people. So they do, but so I don't know. I would rather think that that's what was happening than that he really planned this.
So is his death considered a punishment?
Wait 1 second. Joette,
Okay,
go, and then
so
I'll answer.
I'm reminded of the story in the Torah of the Sotah, where if a
Define
man
sota, yeah.
if a man thinks his wife is unfaithful, they bring her to the town center, and she's forced to drink this concoction of ashes and water. Or something. And if she was faithful, she would not get sick. And if she was unfaithful, she would be sick and she would be punished and so on. And I remember Marv saying to me that this was done because men were stupid, and that it was described as a story that shows that men were stupid, but that it actually probably didn't happen as it was described. So I'm going along with you that this probably didn't happen as it was described.
So the Sota thing that Joette just talked about, and then you had something, right? No. Okay. The Sota thing that Joette just talked about, when I was in rabbinical school, we learned that they did it on purpose. They did it on purpose because it was like ashes, soot and things in water, and nobody gets sick from soot and things in water. So the rabbis deliberately set that up in order to, whatever was really going on, to make it look like the woman was not responsible, because it would disturb the societal impact if all of these people brought these women and, that happened. So they set up this concoction. A lot of people drink, charcoal things in drinks now, like they're health drinks. So people didn't generally get sick from that. Great example.
What I was wondering, if when Rabbi Meir died, was that in the story, was that a punishment for him? Because she committed suicide and then he died. He went off somewhere and died, I think.
So I'll check the text again. I meant to bring it verbatim, and I didn't do that. I'll check the text again. I don't think it says anything about, it was a zapping from God or anything like that. If the people who have already heard the Rabbi Yochanan story are willing for me to bring it out one more time, I'll show you a very similar story. And then you'll see that that's one of the things that happens sometimes in the text. I think we're done, and we did not do one Bruria text that's actually a very beautiful one for the two of them. That is what I'd like to conclude with, so I will do that next week when we begin. However, don't go anywhere. Adrian? We're going to sing Hatikva. I don't think you did that after the last class. Yeah, you did? You did it today? Okay. But Adrian's going to tell you a little bit about her, just give an update about her daughter in Israel that I'm sure that you would want to hear. And then we'll sing Hatikva, and then we'll enjoy the day.
Okay. So I had a conversation with my daughter, Jody, and I wanted to tell you because, okay, it's an everyday, it's about her everyday life right now. And I had called to tell her something that was a coincidence, and she didn't respond to me. Somebody she knew, blah, blah, blah. And the next day she said, Mom, I can't listen to any chit-chat. American Jews just don't get it. They don't get what's going on.
And I'm coming to you from Israel North. Sir. In the background.
You want to step out?
Here.
Yeah. Thank you.
These are missiles.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
The American
Jews just don't get it. What's going on here in everyday life? We have no restaurants open. We are staying home. We're not out on this. There's hardly anybody out on the streets. She said we have some grocery stores open, so there's enough food. However, East Jerusalem doesn't have enough food, so we're concerned about them. She says we have a cleaner that we pay. He's on salary. They live in a complex, beautiful complex, and he comes and cleans every day. he can't get here. He's not allowed to come here. She said, let's see what else. Their lives economically, they're turned around. They don't know. I mean, they have no. Their income isn't there. Most everybody. Okay, one more thing. That's the main part of it. I just wanted you to be aware. Every day is fraught with more violence, and they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and that's how their lives are today. I just wanted you to know. And I happen to have about 9 immediate family members there, including grown grandkids. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we don't often, a number of our members have children living in Israel, but we don't often get to hear about immediate conversations. Joette, you have that too, and I'm sure many others do as well. Now we're going to just close with Hatikva. It's absolutely impossible for us who are here to really understand what people are going through. It's just part of the deal of not actually being there.
Absolutely.
But we can do many, many, many other things. So before we sing Hatikva, I'll let you know that please forgive me for taking one more minute. On November 19th, we were supposed to have Mitzvah Day at Adat Ariel. But we changed it to be about Israel and Israeli organizations that may be in need as the war goes on. But the really important part of what we're doing on November 19th is that we're bringing an American-Israeli. His name is Joel Chasnoff, and he's written a number of books, and a number of books about Israel. He served in Sahal, and he lives in Ra'anana, and he's a stand-up comedian. And he's coming here on November 19th in the evening in order to not only to share humor that Israelis are trying to reclaim so that they have a little bit of interaction with friends and family, but he's going to do a stand-up evening with also discussion and things to share from his experiences in Israel. And so please look for that date. We have raised the money to bring him here. Any cost for that event, every single penny of it will go to Israeli organizations in need of support.
Are tickets being sold?
They're not being sold yet. They'll come out in a couple of days. We literally put this together starting on Friday. So now we have all the information, and we'll be doing it. And you can look him up, Joel Chasnoff. You can look him up. He's a really funny person, but he's also written beautiful books about Israel, both humorous and poignant and very real. And he's a perfect person to be here to be with us. It's not a downer. It's not supposed to be negative in any way. It's supposed to infuse us with understanding and conviction. So that's it. Thank you for your time in that. And now we'll do Hatikva, and we'll end today. Oh, also we want to thank Adat Ariel Sisterhood, because they're helping to support bringing Joel Chasnoff here. Kol od balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homiyah ulfatei mizrach kadima ayin litzion Sophia od lo Tikvateinu, Hatikva שנתיים, ליותם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון ירושלים. ליותם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון Yerushalayim. We're very fortunate that Adat Ariel is a strongly Zionist organization, no apologies. And so we will be there for one another all the way through whatever needs to happen over the next number of days, weeks, and months.